Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
What's going on, Winnipeg, Manitoba? Welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Tidy business-like win over the Washington Capitals last night. Connor Hellebuyck shutout and a very, very nice debut for the two newest members of the Jets, Tyler Toffoli and Colin Miller last night. And I must say, a very fun night at the arena. Pretty good crowd. A couple delicious chants at the expense of Alex Ovechkin. But most importantly, a great team win and 2 points in the standings as the Jets continue to battle with Dallas and Colorado for the top of the Central Division. We're going to chop it up, break down last night's game right off the top. Mike McIntyre will join us for the latest on the Jets and a look ahead to tomorrow's big game against the red-hot Nashville Predators coming to town. We're also going to take a trip around the league. It's been a minute since we've had our pal Dave McCarthy from NHL.com and SiriusXM NHL Radio on the program. Dave will join us and we'll get his thoughts on where the Jets stand, the Central Division, the Wild West, as well as some of the winners and losers coming out of the trade deadline. And later on today, towards the end of the program, we finally get an update on this Brianne Harris situation, which was the story of the Scotties. Lots of interested curling fans trying to figure out what exactly was the situation. We found it now, a positive test for a banned substance, an appeal. We'll get the latest on the entire situation with Ted Wyman as well, and his thoughts on the Brier that just passed. What a great performance by Brad Gushue, winning number 6 in Regina on Sunday. But the Brianne Harris story is the story in curling right now. And we'll finally get a little bit of clarity on that with Ted later on. Just before we bring in Michael Remis, shout out to everybody in chat, especially you gold micers. Look at that. Nicole J, I see Schickster, Derek Schmidt. Really appreciate all the members' support, but really cool to see those gold mics pop up now that everyone has been in for 2 years officially as of the big anniversary day last Friday. And what a show that was. Breaking records from start to finish of that program. Man, that was fun, and obviously fun for Jet fans as well because of the excitement around the acquisitions of Toffoli and Colin Miller a little bit later on. Just before we bring in Ramo, though, I do want to thank the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. The great people at Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, the Winnipeg Jets, Little Brown Jug, Consolidated Supply, Manitoba Battery, Canadian Club, Modern Man Barbershop, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, Boston Pizza, and our friends down at Royal Sports. I know Royal's going to be busy as we get closer to the playoffs. A lot of people figuring out what white jersey, who they want to get on it. That was a popular topic amongst a few friends after the game last night. But let's get to that game. Michael Remis, what's going on? What'd you think? Pretty dominating game for Winnipeg. I mean, if you wanted to see how this team looked with the new players in the lineup, albeit no Gabe Vilardi, pretty much ticked off all the boxes. And exactly what you wanted to see from this team after that steamer they dropped in Vancouver on Saturday night.
Yeah, we needed to see the Jets get back to a dominating performance against an inferior opponent. We'd seen too many of these games. Buffalo, you get down and have to come back. Chicago, you're squeaking out overtime wins. Arizona, squeaking out an overtime wins. We haven't seen the Jets really just stomped on someone, and they got back to it. Energized home crowd, excitement for new players in the lineup who look great, and they really just put the screws to Washington for 3 periods. Had the puck the whole time. Easy shutout for Connor Hellebuyck. Maybe had to make some big saves early on, but I think the Jets need to make a statement after that Saturday game where they weren't at their best, and the response was certainly there as they thoroughly outplayed. And hey, every line contributed. The top 3 lines each with a goal on their way to a tidy 3-0 victory.
I think the first and foremost we got to talk about the new guys, Toffoli and Colin Miller. And listen, I thought Miller, just starting on the blue line, I thought Miller had a strong game. I mean, he can definitely skate, can move the puck, We didn't really see that big shot that we have heard a lot about. I'm looking forward to seeing him unleash that coming up, but seemed to fit in quite well with Dylan Sandberg. And, having a right shot on that right side does make a difference at times as well. Listen, I've got a lot of time for Nate Schmidt in the season that he's had so far, but it was interesting to see how Miller fit in and certainly did look good. And I'll say this, having a new guy on the right side, I think maybe sparked old number 4, Neil Pionk. He had a game yesterday, and what a goal he scored, Remo, driving the net early in the first period to score what ended up being the winning goal and get the team on the board. Nice to see Neil get a little bit of offense into the game.
Yeah, that was Neil Pionk's first goal in 20 games, snapping a 20-game goal streak. And when the Jets score first, Huss, it's going pretty good for them. 27-3-1. And, nice move there, Mason and Appleton. I mean, quietly has 5 assists in his last 5 games. Adam Lowry chipping in. He's got 6 points in his last 6 games. So those guys helping the Jets get on the board first. Some nice board play to free the puck out. Appleton, Lowry, and then Pionk in the back of the net. And yeah, nicely done. His 5th of the season. So good start there for the Jets. And they wanted to get off to a good start because of all the bad taste in their mouth from Saturday's game against Vancouver. And I am getting ripped a bit in the chat, not saying leaving out Friday's game where they also got a shutout. So 2 shutouts now and their last 2 wins. You should also, I guess, the last 3 games the Jets have been played in has been a shutout. One of them they got shut out, but they lost to Vancouver. It wasn't a great performance, but I don't think it means they're a bad team all of a sudden. I think it was just a bad game, and they got called out by the coach and certainly responded with authority last night against Washington.
Yeah, listen, we can go through the lines because, they all had strong games. But you mentioned Mason Appleton, and for whatever reason, he seems to take quite a bit of heat from a certain section of fans, including a few guys I was with last night. And then you mentioned it. He is, he's doing exactly what the coaching staff wants him to do, be hard on pucks. And, 5 assists in the last 3 games. He had those 2 beautiful primary assists in the 4-3 loss at home to the Kraken last week. And was the guy that sent Neil Pionk in all alone to get things going last night. But Lowry and Niederreiter are rolling right now. And in some ways, Remo, I was thinking about this last night. It reminds me of what Adam Lowry did in the final 15 games or so of last season when the Jets were playing for their playoff lives. Of course, Lowry had that long stretch without a goal last season. And then by the end of the year, had really stepped it up, scored some big goals, made big plays, was a big part of the team getting over that hump and getting into the playoffs, and was also one of the Jets' best players in the series against the Vegas Golden Knights. So, if that line can get back to scoring the way they did earlier on in the season, that's a significant development for the Winnipeg Jets because, as we've said and we saw last night, with the addition of Tyler Toffoli and hopefully the impending return of Gabriel Velarde, Rick Bowness is going to have 2 legit scoring lines, 1A, 1B, call them whatever you want. The top 6 for the Winnipeg Jets looks as good as it has in a long time, maybe ever.
Yeah, and they don't even have Velarde back, who's looking so good. And yeah, when the Jets were playing really well, was that third line that was contributing quite a bit. You look at Adam Lowry's month-by-month splits. October, 6 points in 9 games. November, 7 and 13. December, then it started to fall off, 4 and 13. January found it a little more, 6 and 12. But February, no goals for Lowry. Only month with no goals and only 2 assists in 11 games. In March, making up for lost time. He's got 6 points in 6 games here for Lowry. And, when that team is scoring goals, it helps the Jets get to the magic number of 3, which they did last night. When the Jets score 3, their record 35, 4, and 1. And when you have, 2 of the best goalies in the best goalie tandem in the league, certainly helps. And I think they're undefeated when scoring 4 as they had that legendary streak of 3 or less. So, scoring, well, hey, the recipe, score 3, and easy to score 3 when you get contributions from your top 3 lines. And let's not leave with the fourth line. I thought Cole Perfetti's fit in nicely there on line 4. I mean, Nemestikov, he's playing line bingo. He's played on every line. Actually, that third line has kind of been untouched, but he's played every position on every line, basically. And Morgan Barron is having a very solid campaign as well. So they do have a very solid group, and it's going to be tough to take someone out when Gabe Vilardi comes back, wherever that may be. Jets are off today, so we don't know. Maybe he's skating on his own or not. I mean, Bones did say maybe he could be skating yesterday, but we won't know anything official till tomorrow. And
yeah, the hope
daily,
is, I mean, listen, if we could hear that Vilardi's on the ice at some point this week, I think everyone would take that. I mean, it's not about needing the guy for Wednesday or Friday night. It's about getting him back as close to 100% as possible and getting in games before the playoffs begin, and really seeing how things might shake out with all of your top 6 forwards healthy and what the best sort of fit with that is. And again, we'll get back to the lines. I thought the top line looked very good and really controlled play with Nikolai Ehlers. But Tyler Toffoli, we've seen a lot of Toffoli in the past on the other side, and he's been a guy that has been a bit of a burr in the saddle of the Jets and a lot of other teams throughout his career. He looked good, really good with Sean Monahan and his old buddy Alex Iafallo on that. Iafallo ended up getting credited with the deflection off the Josh Morrissey shot for the goal that line scored. But the one thing that really stood out to me, Remo, being in the building and just sort of focusing on Toffoli, he has such a knack for finding the soft spaces in the ice to give him the room to get the puck from line mates. And then there is very little hesitation when it comes to putting the puck on the net. Had a couple really nice chances last night. Just bounced one off, I believe, Lindgren's shoulder that narrowly went in. This is a lot of the things that we had hoped for, that we'd heard about Tyler Toffoli, that we remembered, were on display last night, despite the fact that he wasn't on the score sheet officially with a goal and an assist.
Yeah, didn't make the score sheet, but there he was in front on line mate Alex Iafallo's goal, causing havoc for Lindgren, the Caps goalie. It was a really nice passing play there with Morrissey and DeMello setting up a shot and Iafallo tipping it in. I don't know if you knew this, Huss, but they were teammates together in LA, reunited here in Winnipeg, went out for a nice meal. That was the big story yesterday. Went out for a meal on Sunday, and there they were lining up, and Toffoli fit in really well. Looks good in that 73 jersey, and you saw him pull the moves on Ovechkin. Didn't quite get a scoring chance out of it near the end of his shift, but opted for the through the legs toe drag. And look, we know he's got a good shot. He finds the open areas and gets them, and he goes to the net. He's a really nice fit, and the Jets certainly. Who was TSN put out this stat here yesterday where I was like, ugh. Second most times shut out among all teams since January 13, and since January 13th, they're second least, or 30th of 32 teams in goals for per game. Tyler Toffoli can certainly help them raise that goals for per game average here as we head into the playoffs.
Of course, had that 7-game stretch where they scored 7 goals. I mean,
yeah.
They just had a 2-week period where the offense sort of was non-existent, basically. That certainly has come around. And then, you mix in, I think, a pretty good run with one real dud on Saturday night where they didn't score and frankly didn't really deserve to. But, I think what everyone was expecting is, you put that one in the rearview mirror, come back with a nice, solid 60-minute effort, incorporate the new players, and that's exactly what had happened. Seed of wonder with an interesting one. Did Iafallo not make a case to stay on Toffoli's line? Listen, he did for sure. I thought that, Alex had a great game yesterday. And, I am a big fan of his. And, we've talked to Dennis yesterday. Alex Iafallo is a player that is versatile enough that he can really help your team in many different ways. If you need him up in the top 6, he can play there. We saw it last night, and I thought he had a real strong one along with Monahan and Toffoli. But can also be a difference maker playing in that bottom six. And from the beginning of the season, I thought at some point and this is funny because I was just giving Mason Appleton credit for his recent play and how he's really been a big part of the scoring that line has been doing. I still wouldn't be surprised if at some point we see Iafallo alongside Niederreiter and Lowry on that third line. But in the meantime, listen, they're doing their thing as they've done all season long. And if Velarde comes back and that top six is healthy and Iafallo is playing on a fourth line with the likes of Perfetti and Barron and Nemetsnikov, it just speaks to the competition that this team is going to be having internally for all players that have had big seasons and have had a big part of the team's success to be out there when Rick Bowness sizes his 12 so far. Very difficult to kind of pick on anyone that, didn't have a strong performance last night, and it's exactly what you wanted to see coming out of it. You know what, Reno, before we get to the clip of Bones and some high praise for the Jets from Spencer Carberry, let's throw up the jacket presentation, because I think in a game like that last night where so many players had a piece of it, pretty cool to see who the Jets inside the room, Mark Scheifele and Laurent Brossoit, to be exact, decided to give the jackets to after the first win with Toffoli and Miller in the fold.
Like Bones said, team game, but I'm going to give it to the guy who came in. Didn't take long for him to make a difference. Go to the new guy. Yeah.
Sorry, let me just get the... It would be help if there was the video up.
Yes, the video definitely. It adds a lot. Although, from a podcast perspective, the podcasters are going, what are you guys waiting for? But again, we do have video. That's why you should check it out on YouTube. Here's the jacket presentation last night after the 3-0 win.
Like Bones said, team game, but I'm going to give it to the guy who came in. Didn't take long for him to make a difference. Go to the new guy. Yeah. Thanks for the donation. Easy money, boys. Let's keep rolling.
Hey, Bucky, good game. Sorry, man. JMO, hell of a lot of good plays. We're just going to Millsy.
Yeah, good job, boys. That was fun. Keep it rolling.
I had to laugh at Toffoli's quick little speech last night. Seems to be, you can tell why he's so liked by many of his other teammates before, and obviously connected with Alex Iafallo and making fast friends in that Jet room. Here's the other thing, and I know some people have been talking about it in chat. Let's get the Spencer Carberry quote up, because we'll get to some Bones and a little bit about Adam Lowry coming out of the game last night. But it's always interesting to hear opposition coaches, especially ones from the East that don't see the Winnipeg Jets very much, with their thought of it. Spencer Carberry left Canada Life Centre very impressed with what the home team did to his Caps last night.
Well, they had the puck for 75% of the game, so that makes it difficult to create anything offensively. And then when we did just not nearly a good enough job getting to the interior, zero traffic on Hellebuyck, so anything that we did generate scoring chance-wise, he saw it clean. And obviously everybody knows if he sees the shot, he's going to stop it. So it's not a recipe for success against this team.
What made maintaining possession so difficult for us?
Just right from the start. I mean, it just felt like me when I was standing there, watched it. It was just bigger, faster, stronger. Every facet. They just were. So you got to tip your cap. Like, that's a really good team that just got better with Toffoli and Monahan and those guys. It just felt like they were bigger, stronger on pucks, and they were just way quicker than us everywhere.
High praise from Carberry last night. We're going to hear from Bones and Lowry. I have to give a major stick tap and tip of the cap to the fans up in, I think it was like 313, 312 last night, that started the "Can't Catch Gretzky" chant, Reem. That was some fine work by the folks up in the 300s. And it's funny, I brought that up with Dusty today on the Lock Shop, and he obviously has a big following in Edmonton. They don't really get into many chants there in Edmonton, but I suggested that if there was ever a place that the "Can't Catch Gretzky" chant might be appropriate, it would be in Edmonton when the Caps are there tomorrow. So we'll see whether the Winnipeg fans can inspire Oiler fans for a little bit of fun tomorrow night.
Yeah, and Ovechkin in his career has really just laid the smack down on the Jets over and over, and they showed the highlights of the last time they played where he scored goals 801, 802, and you knew he was going to be hitting that milestone going in. In his career against the Jets Thrashers, Huss, Ovechkin in 72 games, 53 goals, 45 assists, 98 points. Far and away. Actually, that's not far away. It is the most points. Oh, no. Sorry, he had more against Carolina, I guess because they don't really play as much as they used to. But still, it's up there among the leaders with points against. So he's historically dominated the Jets. I always use, March games that they've played in the past, Huss. I don't know, maybe 12 years ago.
Let's
we don't need to get into it.
Well, it was the opposite of that last night.
It was the opposite. It was the point is, it is the opposite yesterday, and the Jets really shut him down. And we don't know if he's going to catch it. It seemed like it was going to happen before, and now it's not exactly 100%.
Well, and speaking of comparing that to those infamous 2 games in Jets history back in whatever it was, 2012 or 2013 against the Caps, it was also a complete opposite performance of what the Jets had for the Canucks on Saturday night. And Rick Bowness talked about his team bouncing back and pushing back, if you will, after an ugly one on Saturday night. The coach said as much afterwards.
I don't give the guys credit. They weren't very happy with our game in Vancouver, so they knew they had to bounce back, and they did. I mean, it was a good, solid team effort tonight, so that's what it takes.
Can you point to a couple of things that you did better tonight as a team?
We defended a lot better. We spent less time in our zone. We spent a lot of time in their zone. We still like to create a little more offense, but the big thing was that we defended much better. We stayed above them. We slowed them down a little bit when we could. We didn't let them dictate the pace of the game like we did in Vancouver.
All right, so there's Bones, obviously pleased with the way his team's played in relation to Saturday night's game. And here's a little bit more from Bones on the team's response on the ice last night after what happened on the weekend.
You hate to lose 5-0. You do. That's the bottom line. So give them credit. They bounce back. Again, it's one of those, you're not sitting on it for 3 or 4 days. You're coming home yesterday and you're getting ready to play today, and you put it behind you. And that's what we talked about right after the game in Vancouver. Get ready for Monday.
Rick, one of the players, what you said the other night, didn't think really anybody had it going, and that would include, I assume, Connor Hellebuyck. He bounced back in a big way, obviously. Tonight, maybe his best save of the game came in the opening seconds.
You talk about a timely save. That's it, right there. It was. All of a sudden, we won the face-off. So it kind of a broken play, but yeah, we talk a lot about timely goals and timely saves. That's right up there with the timely save. Right.
You knew Helly was locked in and ready to go on that save just in the first 20 seconds or so of the hockey game. And after that, the team stepped up and certainly didn't have to work as hard for that one as maybe some of the other ones, but he will definitely take it. Obviously, the big story outside of the actual win was the new players, Tyler Toffoli and Colin Miller. Here's what Bones had to say about the new guys.
Both of them played very, very well. They're a good fit. I like the look of that Sean's line. There's good chemistry there already with Alex and he. So, no, that line looked really good. And both new guys, give them credit because they haven't skated in a few days, right, since the trade. So give them both credit for coming out and giving us a really good effort.
All right, so there's Bones on Toffoli and Miller in their debuts. Here's a little bit more from the coach on just integrating 2 new players into the lineup.
New lines and new options. Yeah, we got to get used to them. We got to get used to their strengths, and yeah, it just gives us a few more options when Gabe comes back. We'll obviously be reevaluating everything again when that time comes. But the important part is that these are 2 really good people that fit right into that locker room.
All right, so there was a little bit more on the newest members of the Jets. We've spent quite a bit of time talking about the top line, and they obviously had a strong performance with Ehlers alongside Scheifele and Connor. It was also a good night for Cole Perfetti and the fourth line. Here's what Bones had to say about line 4 and how they contributed to the win.
Actually, going into the game, I was going to try to get Cole up on left wing a little bit with Sean and try to help him get going. But all 4 lines were looking good, so I didn't have to worry about it. But we put Cole in there tonight, and I told him before the game there's going to be shifts. I'll put you up on left wing with Sean and Tyler and see if we can help you get going. But the fourth line was going good, and I didn't have to worry about it too much because they were creating chances.
Yeah, and very little special teams plays, so you could just keep rolling the 4 lines.
Yeah.
Noticed on that fourth line, Morgan took all the face-offs tonight. Vlad didn't.
Vlad's got a bad thumb. Simple as that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Good. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Bones. A much happier Rick Bowness on Monday night than he was Saturday night for obvious reasons. Let's hear a little bit from the captain as well before we bring in Dave McCarthy. Here's Adam Lowry on bouncing back after the stinker on Saturday night.
We talked about the game. We watched some clips and saw areas where we could clean up, and I think we got off to a better start. We really got behind the 8 ball against Vancouver, and tonight I think our first 10 minutes were great. We had some chances. We got the lead, which is kind of new for us. We haven't been scoring a whole lot in the first period, so I think as the game went on, we just kept chipping away and kind of imposing our style, as opposed to trying to play theirs. And I think when we do that, good things happen. And Ellie was great back there.
As the captain, you want to welcome in new teammates, and certainly we saw pretty nice games from both Miller and Toffoli right off the bat. Here's what Captain Adam Lowry had to say about his new teammates.
Yeah, they fit in great, and I think it's only going to get better, as they adjust, they get even more comfortable in the systems. Toff had some really great looks. Their line, generated some really good chances. They scored a big goal for us. You can see, why he's, such a good goal scorer in this league. His release is unbelievable. He's such a smart player, goes to such good areas, and Colin did a great job getting pucks through, in the D zone, moving the puck well, efficiently. I think as he develops chemistry with Samby, that's only going to continue. I think learning a new system, coming in kind of a whirlwind day. So, all things considered, I think, they both did a great job.
All right, and one more from Captain Adam Lowry, and this is him on, just the team moving past the uncertainty of the deadline, knowing what the squad looks like, and, obviously having a great debut with the 2 players in the lineup last night at home.
I think kind of the distraction of what's going to happen, who you're going to welcome in, our guy's going to be kind of out the door, things like that. Now that that's over, we can really nail down, focus on building the chemistry, getting the lines going, having all 4 lines, all 3 pairs, firing on all cylinders, and, trying to integrate those new guys, and I think we look at how big of an impact Sean's had on our team, and we're expecting big things from those 2 other guys too. So it's all about making sure we're ready come playoff time, that we can hit that first round kind of at the top of our game. So that's what we'll use these next 18 games for.
All right, so there's the captain, another great game for his line, another goal for his line. And most importantly, getting the win and moving past a real disappointing performance by the club Saturday night against the Vancouver Canucks. We're going to talk more about the Jets and look ahead to the big one tomorrow against the red-hot Nashville Predators in Winnipeg. But first, coming up next, our old pal Dave McCarthy returns from NHL.com. Got to shout out Spicy and the guys over at Consolidated Supply. It is... I know we got a snowfall warning right now, and it doesn't really feel like spring, but I'll tell you what, we're into March, folks, and this is going to come, and then it's going to go, and we're going to be working ahead on all sorts of projects, and whether it is for your business or your home, our guys at Consolidated Supply are ready for a big spring and summer. They, of course, are the leaders in irrigation systems, artificial turf, Golf Carts is the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba, both new and used. They've also got other great options for your property, including amazing hot tubs and incredible outdoor kitchen options. And of course, they're also the experts and the go-to guys for small engine parts and repair. Check out Consolidated Supply online at cte.ca and head on down to their showroom, open to the public at 1395 Niagara Road East. Tell them the boys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. And again, their website for more on Consolidated Supply is cte.ca. A big congrats to Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery. The new location's finally open. Head on down and check them out at the new spot in the south side of the city, 452 Dover Court Drive, a beautiful new facility, a great home for the Manitoba Battery gang. And, they always have great deals. I mean, the best prices in town. They beat the pants off the big box stores, period. Shopping local. But they're in such a good mood with this new location that any battery you need that's regularly priced at over $60 is now $10 cheaper when you pick it up in store. And check this out. If you need AA's or AAA batteries, skip the cheap versions and grab some industrial grade energizers for only 40 cents a piece. Those deals and much more. Grand opening specials right now for Manitoba Battery. 452 Dover Court Drive's the new location, the original spot, 1026 Logan Avenue. And of course, you can always order online at manitobabattery.com or give them a call at 783-8787. Bella's thinking about spring. If you need a new look or just want to refresh the cut, get on down to Modern Man Barber Shops with 8 locations in the city of Winnipeg, including their newest standalone locations on Plessis Road and Pembina Highway, right by Bishop. Modern Man, guys, has you covered with a variety of grooming services, including haircuts, beard shaping, shaves, color services, and more. We can book your look via modernmanbarber.com. And make sure to give them a follow on Instagram as well, at Modern Man Barbershops. And just before we continue the festivities here, got to shout out our friends at Canadian Club, Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey. Had such a great event with WSTers and the Canadian Club gang at the Whiskey Festival event we did at the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame that we looking forward to doing it again. But in the meantime, Whiskey Fest is over, but the great taste of Canadian Club's always waiting for you at your local Manitoba liquor marts. Check out their display when you pop in next. And remember to always enjoy responsibly. Long time no talk, Dave. Great to have you back on WST.
It's always good to be on with my people in Winnipeg. Huss, how you doing, man?
I'm, I'm doing well. And people around here, I think, are pretty fired up. Great win last night for the Jets after a real stinker on Saturday night against the Vancouver Canucks. And a lot of optimism about this team's chances going into a completely wide open Western Conference in the playoffs after a pretty effective deadline, to say the least, for Kevin Cheveldayoff. Let me ask you, what did you think about what Chevy did, starting with the Monahan deal and then adding Toffoli and Colin Miller at the deadline?
I think the moves were good. I liked the fact that it was also done over an extended period of time so that you're not turning over a large chunk of your lineup in a short period of time. I think that's a mistake that some teams can run into at this time of the year, where you add too much in a short period of time and then suddenly you're essentially trying to work in a new third of your lineup at the most important time of the year. And that's difficult to do. Like, I do find league-wide, the first handful of games after the trade deadline are not unlike games 1, 2, 3, 4 of the regular season, where you're essentially trying to reestablish what you are as a team, redefine roles, and as I said, if you bring in too many guys, it can be too much at times. So I do like how they spaced it out, and I like what they did in terms of targeting areas of need. You can never go wrong with another defenseman like Colin Miller, who's big, he's nasty, he's got a pretty good shot. He just adds some depth. You can never go wrong by adding a guy like that. And up front, I think what they've done is they've lengthened the lineup a little bit. Sean Monahan been having a really good year. So he comes in, he's a guy that can fill a role, on the second line. If need be, heaven forbid, he can move up the lineup. Hopefully that's not the case. And Tyler Toffoli just brings you another guy who has the ability to shoot it in the net, which is good. So now you force the opponent's coach to have to make a decision, right? Do I worry about Scheifele and Connor and Ehlers, or do I worry about Toffoli and Monahan? You can only really match up your best line against so many of those guys, your best defensive pairing against so many of those guys. Now the other group has the ability to swing the tide. Guy like Cole Perfetti, maybe that slots him even a little bit more effectively in the lineup for him to make a difference. So I thought Kevin Cheveldayoff did some really good work. And, you talked about Hustler being wide open in the Western Conference. I guess that's one way to look at it, but I'd say it's more like a murderer's row because, I think you can legitimately sit here and make an argument that if 6, maybe 7 of the teams that are in the playoff picture right now in the West were to come through and represent the West in the Cup final, you'd look and you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I believe that. So it's going to be really difficult in the West. I did think they needed to strengthen the team, and I think they did so effectively.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about the West overall, and maybe focus in first on the Central Division. Dallas made an early move, getting Chris Tanev, and it seemed like with Logan Stankoven kind of emerging there, they didn't feel they had the need to do much else. Mm-hmm. Colorado, a very different story. I mean, the Byram for Middlestad deal, maybe the most interesting deal, a straight-up hockey trade, 1-for-1 that we saw at the deadline, and at the same time getting Walker over for Philly. I mean, when you're looking at the Central right now, and I guess we should include the Nashville Predators, who are the hottest team in the National Hockey League. We're going to see them here in the Peg tomorrow night. Mm-hmm. Overall, with the moves, is it anyone's game in the Central right now, or do you see a significant favorite based on what the moves, the way the rosters look today?
No, I don't see a favorite. I think any one of those 3 teams, I mean, Nashville I might put a little bit lower in terms of where I have them slotted. They've been really good. They've been on a terrific run since the All-Star game, since Barry Trotz snaked the old trip to the Sphere there. But no, I think it's Dallas, Winnipeg, and Colorado that are my clear top 3. But beyond that, I can't identify which one I think is best. I think all 3 have an absolute chance to come out of that division. And like I said, represent the West in the Stanley Cup Finals. So Colorado, you're right. That was interesting because they've been trying to fill that second line center spot since Nazem Kadri left in free agency. And they went out and they got Ryan Johansson. The fit just really wasn't there. He wasn't able to play at the pace that Colorado wants to play at. And when you want to play a high pace, speed type game, and you've got a guy who's just a couple of steps behind it, it's going to really be difficult to execute the game plan in that type of a situation. So they went out and got a guy in Casey Middlestad who's been very good in Buffalo this year. He's blossomed into a quality player compared to where he was when he came into the league. Took him a little longer, but he's been effective. And they feel he will be a better fit. It obviously cost them Bowen Byram. And in bringing in Sean Walker, you almost essentially come up with Bowen Byram light and a motivated guy who's heading toward free agency who is looking to play good and put himself in a good position. So, I like what they did in Colorado. I do. But, I don't know who the favorite is in this Central Division. Because you look at Colorado, they've got quality players all throughout that line. Nathan McKinnon's having a Hart Trophy caliber year. Mikko Rantanen is outstanding. What they've got is really a force to contend with. They play with pace, they play with speed, they're physical. And it was funny, I was talking to Kyle Keefe, one of the Avalanche analysts on Altitude TV on the brunch on Sunday. He said what they remind him of is an angry team. Like a team that just comes in and will not take no for an answer. And they're not just here for pots of gold and rainbows. and throw their sticks on the ice for a good time and see what happens. Like, they're looking to take a pound out of you while they do it. So, they're a quality team. Dallas, they've got all the parts. I do think the advantage Dallas and Colorado might have, but it sounds weird to say for a team that had their goalie go to the All-Star game in Alexander Georgiev, but as good as he's been, I think I rank Winnipeg at the top in terms of goaltending. Dallas maybe just slightly below Winnipeg with Jake Ottinger, and then Alex Georgiev as the third best goalie in the Central. But in saying all that, there's 29 other teams that would look at any one of those three goalies and be like, yeah, we'll take him. We'll be good with that guy. So the goaltending is going to be real good in the Central as well.
It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, listen, I think we got to throw UC Saros in there. I mean, albeit if they're not, we might think of them as maybe below that tier of teams.
But a guy that could help, really steal a series, maybe if he gets hot, right?
Absolutely. And and I do look at Colorado and wonder, does their goaltending stack up, with the teams just in their own division, and then what they'll have to do to keep moving on? Were you surprised there was so little goaltender activity leading up to the deadline and at the deadline, considering the conversations we've had in so many markets this year?
A little bit. I think we were looking at New Jersey, right? But to the point where they were at in the standings, by the time the trade deadline rolled around, I was less surprised than if they had have been a point or two out of the playoff picture. I think they waited too long. And by last week, the season had slipped away. The McCarthy decision desk declared that the Devils were done. How's that for alliteration? Not this past Sunday, but the Sunday prior. And I've been right. They waited too long. So, the Devils need a goalie. They went out and they got a couple of stopgaps in Jake Allen and Kaapo Kähkönen. But, we're talking about legit number one guys that could be on the move, like a Jacob Markstrom. I know UC Saros' name was dangled a little bit, but then the Predators went on their incredible run, right? So you can't, if you're Barry Trotz, snake the trip to the Sphere, then the team goes out and actually gets the message and plays well to the point where they've, I think, firmly established themselves in a playoff spot, and then heave their goalie overboard. You can't do that. So I didn't expect Saros to get moved. I think the Devils waited too late to pay the price for Jacob Markstrom. So we'll revisit in the offseason because I still think there will be some goaltending activity. But in terms of elite goalies possibly available, the moment had passed, so to speak, whether it was for teams looking to acquire or teams that could be sellers now is being like, wait a minute, not selling anymore. So, yeah, I guess beyond that, Colorado was an interesting one. Not any disrespect to Alexander Georgiev at all. I'm just concerned if something happens and he gets banged up, they don't have any experience now between the pipes, or are they going to regret not bringing in, a Jake Allen or somebody of that nature? That to me is the concern. But no, like I said, in terms of elite guys, I'm not surprised we didn't see a lot of activity at this point.
Dave, speaking of the McCarthy decision desk,
yes.
Pacific Division post-deadline, where's your personal power poll take you? And maybe if you could, first of all, give us your reaction to the Hurdle deal, which came in right at the buzzer. Kelly McCrimmon did it again, and I'm still scratching my head wondering what the heck Mike Greer's trying to do with that Sharks team.
Well, great deal for San Jose, for I should say Vegas. You bring in a guy that's an elite power forward in this league, a guy that has the ability to shoot in the net 35, 40 times a year, a big body, and can make an impact at playoff time. So great deal for Vegas. They're not doing anything untoward. Say what you will, but the league actually looks into these things. There's no funny business happening here. Mark Stone is hurt. The man has a lacerated spleen. So I don't know what to tell you there, but the man's hurt. He can't play hockey right now. Alec Martinez, I guess he's in a position where he's going to be out for the requisite amount of time that it requires to go on LTIR. Now, in saying all that, Vegas has got to win some games down the stretch here. They're not in a devastating spot by any stretch. They're relatively comfortable, but they're not home and cooled either. So they're going to have to win some games to make sure all these moves that they made with the Manthas and the Hannafins and the Hurdles that are going to come back actually have a chance to be relevant in the playoffs. But a good move, I think. And the fact that you could get San Jose to eat salary for the remaining 6 years of that deal, like who would? I always look at those type of deals and say, let's just pretend Guy X, who you acquired, in this case Thomas Hertl, was an unrestricted free agent right now. Would you sign him to 6 years times 6.75 a year?
In a heartbeat.
Yes, all day long. So that is a great deal for Vegas. What it means is that Jonathan Marchessault, I hope you got a good realtor. Somebody of that nature. In his case, he's going to be a free agent. He's probably not getting re-signed, right? They're ruthless in Vegas, and they have no reluctance to throw quality core pieces that have done a lot for the team overboard when they feel the time is right. And to an extent, you kind of have to respect it because they don't box themselves in with the type of deals like San Jose did with Hertl, where you look and say, why didn't you trade that guy 2 years ago? Because all you've done is kick the misery down the road in San Jose, where now, 2 years later, you have to move him and eat salary to do it. And you're getting back now what you should have got back 2 years ago that would have been 2 years further along in their progression to help you get back to a point where you're competitive. So, that's the problem when you sign guys when it's not the right time. Same thing with Pittsburgh. Thank God that Kyle Dubas didn't do something stupid like sign Jake Ensel to an 8-year deal. That would have been outrageous. So he made the right move there. San Jose didn't. Now they had to pay for it. Why you would eat for 6 years though? But that's the cost of doing business when you want to try and turn a contract over. And they've got a lot of contracts still in San Jose. They got to try to turn over. So they're not in a good spot at all. So great deal for Vegas. Tough one for San Jose, but they made the mistake 2 years ago when they signed him.
Yeah, that is going to be a long, long road back to respectability for the Sharks right now with the way things are going. And I mean, Dave, you mentioned the way Vegas has played over the last half of the season. They're in the second wild card right now. That's going to be one hell of a prize for the team that wins the West if the Vegas Golden Knights are wild card 2, and that's the matchup. And that could very well happen for Vancouver, one of the teams in the Central Division. But just quickly, thoughts on Vancouver and what Edmonton did and didn't do at the deadline. I was talking to Dustin Nielsen on the Lock Shop yesterday, and I don't know, maybe it was the timing of the deal because it happened before and then deadline day was quiet, but certainly the sentiment is that Ken Holland didn't do enough considering what happened around that division.
Well, okay, so what did you want Ken Holland to do, really, if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan? Firstly, whether he does it 3 days before or on the actual day, it's like we're all grown-ups here. If I can't see you on Christmas, is it okay if I give you your Christmas present on December 21st and we all get along and say, oh, this was great? Really, I have a difficult time with people, oh, you didn't do anything on debt. Can we be mature here? Okay. Really. With the Edmonton Oilers, look, I thought they needed a guy that can add a little bit more depth in the middle of their lineup, some versatility. I think they went out and got that with Adam Henrique, who's a quality player, right? Does he have the name recognition of a Jake Gensel? To me he does, but maybe not league wide. But he's a quality player. He's an effective player. Went out and got Troy Stetcher, and he's a guy that can give you 12 to 15 honest minutes a night. He can block some shots. He can move the puck a little bit. He's a guy that will help out depth-wise on their back end. Yeah, did they go out and get Chris Tanev? No, they didn't. Would it have fit? It might have been a little bit more difficult in terms of having to move money out to make that fit, give up. So, here's the deal with the Edmonton Oilers. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Darnell Nurse, Cody Ceci, and the goalie, Stuart Skinner. Those are the guys that are going to have to drive the ship, really. And if they do, and you can point to a game or two during the run where it's an Adam Henrique game, where he chips in with a couple of big goals that, when McDavid was shut down or Draisaitl was shut down, it was the depth that carried the way that day. And then, maybe Connor Brown's saving his best and he chips in with a couple of goals along the way. And that day was a Connor Brown game. And they went out, they got Sam Carrick as well, who's a guy that is a mean, nasty piece of business on the fourth line. That's a quality addition. It just adds some depth. So, now's not the time for the Oilers to renovate their team. Their team is good enough. What they need to do is commit to playing within the structure that has been more of a suggestion at times than something that has been mandatory, I guess. The message is mandatory, but it seems like guys choose on any given night whether they feel like it or not. That needs to become mandatory game in, game out. The goalie needs to be good. And if all of the guys that are there play to their level, they've got as good a chance as anybody with the additions that they made. I thought they were nice additions that made sense to fill holes that they had on that team. So I thought Ken Holland did a fine job. Now it's on the group that they have in place to try to play to their capabilities.
Dave McCarthy's with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Dave, what's the mood in Leafland post-deadline with either the Bruins or the Panthers looming in round one?
Not ideal, right? They had two opportunities against Boston last week, and they lost 4-1 both times and really weren't in either game. Now, the loss at home to me was more, if you're a Leaf fan, disappointing than the loss on Thursday on the second of back-to-backs where Toronto had I'm not making excuses here, but they had a bit of a tough travel night that day. They didn't get to the airport until late. The Gardiner Expressway had a significant backup. As I was coming home that night, the Leafs also got caught in it, so they didn't get to the airport till an hour later. They didn't really get into Boston and get settled until 3:30 in the morning after playing the night before. Boston was sitting around, and then you got to wake up and play the Bruins. And there were a bunch of guys that were kind of battling it with the flu as well, so it didn't set up good for the Leafs that day. The game on Monday at home was disappointing that they weren't able to turn in a better effort. But that's who it's likely going to be, right, is Boston or Florida. And those, to me, don't really shape up to be terrific matchups. So it's going to be difficult, again, to get out of the first round. We'll see what they can do. But the moves that they made, again, I think they were reasonable for what the team has, because same situation in Edmonton. If Matthews and Tavares and Nylander and Marner and Riley aren't the guys at the forefront, it's not going to matter who they brought in or did not bring in. Those are the guys that are going to have to be in the driver's seat, and it's time that they have a playoffs that they'll look back on when it's all said and done, that they can be proud of. And they really have yet to do that yet in their careers. They were pretty good against Tampa Bay last year. They found a way to win a round, and they went out relatively meekly, right, against the Panthers in the second round. So that's what it's going to come down to. Again, those guys, can they do it? They got a couple of guys in Joel Edmondson and Ilya Lyubushkin who are nasty pieces of business, guys who, as Edmondson said yesterday, I think the playoffs suit my game a little bit better than the regular season. He's a guy that's been there, done it, gone on long runs. So good acquisition. Same thing with Lyubushkin. He's big and mean and nasty. But it's going to have to be the Morgan Rileys and the TJ Brodies and the Jake McCabe's that are good on the back end. Connor Dewar, a guy that brings a little bit of nastiness to the bottom of the lineup, can help kill penalties, a little bit more depth. So I don't think this was the time to go and throw first round picks overboard and Easton Cowens or Fraser Minton's, guys like that, because I love Hustler, the people who are all like, oh, you can't waste a season of Austin Matthews scoring maybe 70 goals. Well, what does that mean? Okay, so next year he scores 47. He's just as likely to shoot it in the net in the playoffs in a year where he scores 47 as when he scores 70. And he's on the books for 4 more years after this. So what do you got a team this year that's quality. You got to go all in. Okay, well, what are you going to tell Matthews 4 years from now when he looks around and he's playing with guys like you and I who are the best that they can find? Right? Like, you want to keep this competitive throughout the duration of time that you've got Matthews and Riley and Nylander on the books, and we'll see what happens with Marner. They've got a good team this year. It doesn't make sense to throw guys overboard, because then what happens is you end up with teams that are even more top heavy than they already are, that have guys having terrific individual seasons that come playoff time, they just don't have the horses because you've thrown away all the futures for kicks that may or may not have ended up having success.
Dave, and speaking of Connor Dewar, good Northern Manitoba boy from the Paw, seemed to make a nice first impression. Just before we go, I know the Leafs are actually heading to Philly, but no Torts. What do you think of the Torts show on the weekend and the 2-game suspension? And maybe more importantly, what that might do to a team that has been such a great story this year, but still has some work to do to book their ticket to the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, firstly, we're in the content business, Hustler, so I loved it. If you are in our business and you did not like it, I've got questions for you. Like, he went full Wolf of Wall Street there. I don't know if we're allowed to use that word on your show, so I won't. But I'll paraphrase. I'm not leaving. I loved it. I thought the ref was going to have to come on a bench and chicken wing him, down the tunnel. So that was terrific. And what we've seen out of Philly this year, we've seen a number of these maelstrom type of events where things boil over, whether it's this, whether it was the Cutter Gauthier affair, where the reaction from within the organization seems visceral, right? And for those on the outside, I think a lot of people are looking and saying, well, that's a little bit over the top. You had the CEO, Dan Hilferty, the other day, who, look, I'll tell you, I hear from the CEO of the Flyers more than any CEO of any team throughout the league. But he said he had our backs, and we respect whatever fine it is, but whatever fine it is, I'm paying.
I think they gave him an extra game because of that comment, to be honest. So they knew the fine wasn't going to hit.
Yeah, I know. So, look, there was that. You had everybody from Hilferty, from Keith Jones to Danny Briere, when Cutter Gauthier said, I don't want to be a Flyer, basically telling him, you don't want to be a Flyer? Then get the hell out of here. We don't want you. Because that's what they're trying to reestablish in Philly, is the identity of what it means to be a Flyer. And they had lost that in the last 4 or 5 years. Apathy had set into that franchise. And apathy's bad, man, in most markets, let alone in the city of brotherly love, where a good percentage of the fan base is willing to fight the opponent in the penalty box. If they see their own team go out there and Pepe Le Pew it around the ice game in, game out, that's not going to fly. Losing games is one thing, but at least look like you give a damn. That had gone away in Philly. So that's why they brought in a Keith Jones, who is a central figure in what it means to be a Flyer. Ditto for Danny Briere. Not necessarily in terms of a backstory with Philly for Torts, but certainly a foxhole kind of guy, right? He's going to make it clear whose side he is on, and he is on the side of his team. Fines or suspensions be damned. So I think that's why we've seen a lot of those visceral reactions. And I think they've done a good job of reestablishing their culture and reinvigorating the fan base. Mission accomplished. Look, if I had told you after game 65, would you take being in third place in the Metro? If that's what it is, if I told you that on October 1st, 100% everybody in Philadelphia would have said, yep, pen, please. You got a pen? You got a pen? Where do I sign? Yes. Now they've got to be good down the stretch, but they've got a chance. So they've got a chance. They have reestablished their culture, and they've been able to turn things over to an extent where they get some picks and futures back for guys that were likely going to walk out the door in free agency. So by all accounts, to me, they've already won this season. Now it's almost, to me, play with house money over the final 17 or 18 games and see if they can't make something happen. And as it relates to the suspension, how it affects the next two games, my goodness, you better go out there and put forward a good effort, because if the head coach is willing to go to bat for you like Torts did, whether or not he was right or whatever, but he made it clear he's on the side of his group. Repay the man and turn in two great efforts so that by the time he comes back, they're even in that much more of a good position.
Dave, always love these chats. Fill people in on when they can hear you chopping it up on the Sunday brunch.
Yeah, we got the Sunday brunch every Sunday, shockingly. Coincidental. How did we come up with that name? 11 a.m. Eastern on NHL Network Radio. That's Sirius XM Channel 91 on your satellite dial. We got Ice Cap 4 nights a week. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's Jonathan Davis over the course of the week. So it'll be me again tonight on Tuesday during the day sometimes, and at NHL.com with the good old pen. I held up the back of a paring knife just the moment ago because I'm looking for a pen, but I don't have one here at the bar, but I still wanted to use props, so tearing it up with the pen at NHL.com.
You know what? The Oscars were a couple days ago, but this is definitely one of the top performances of an interviewee on WST for 2024 so far.
One more thing. We've got the locator here too, right?
Excellent.
There we go.
Tell you what,
props are always good.
We'll see whether there's an arrow pointing to Winnipeg for some playoff conversations coming up as we get closer into April and into May. Looking forward to do this again with you sometime, man. Thanks again for popping on. Always appreciate it.
Yeah, always great, buddy. Thanks for having me.
You train day in and day out, learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
Big thanks to Little Brown Jug. We'll probably be cracking a few generics after that extended show on Friday, planning to get going at 11 a.m. on trade deadline day, which also happens to be the 3rd anniversary of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Also want to thank Wallace & Wallace. They're gearing up for a big spring. It's going to be very shortly. Hopefully the snow will leave, and we'll be seeing the Wallace & Wallace fences and trucks all over the city. The fencing and overhead door experts in the city since 1946. And while fencing will be everywhere come the melting of the snow, right now with these crazy fluctuations in temperatures is the time that's putting the most stress on your garage door. Now, if you need a new garage door, they've got the best selection in town as the Clopay dealer in Manitoba. But to prevent downtime for your garage door, you can give Wallace & Wallace a call to book your maintenance and inspection service call today. For commercial and residential overhead door sales and service, there's only one name or two you need to know, and that is Wallace & Wallace. Speaking of looking good, you got to shout out our pals over at F Apparel. When the snow melts, you know what comes up next. Wedding season, people getting out. A real time to maybe spice up that wardrobe, fellas. And if you do need to do that, get down to Winnipeg's #1 menswear spot, and that is F Apparel. They have incredible deals on custom suits beginning at just $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. If you are getting married or in a wedding party, definitely talk to the fellas at F about a 15% discount when all the guys get their suits at F Apparel for the big day. They've also got great deals for high school grads if you're looking to get that young man a suit that he can wear far beyond his big day, moving out of the school age years. F Apparel, find out more online, book an appointment. It's fepapparel.com. And pop down and see him at 190 Smith Street. And just before we bring Murat back in, I got to shout out our friends at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge. Speaking of spring and summer, cannot wait for the upcoming fishing season. If you're looking for a world-class fly-in fishing opportunity right here in Manitoba where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours, Aikens Lake is the spot. As incredible as the world-class fishing is, even a guy like me caught a couple master anglers there. It's the hospitality of the Aikens team and the Turin family that puts the experience way over the top. Find out more at aikenslake.com, and you can also check them out on all their socials over at Aikens Lake. All right, let's get back to some Jets talk and welcome in Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press to WST. What's up, Mike? How are you?
I'm doing really well, Huss. Another week is upon us. A busy week. Nice to get a little home cooking here for the Jets. They haven't played at home very much, of course. Just that one game in between a couple of road trips, but 3 in a row here. And certainly the team got it off to a good start last night with a clean sheet.
Yeah,
against the Capitals. Yeah,
a heck of a way to start off the homestand and a heck of a way to start off the rest of the season with Tyler Toffoli and Colin Miller. I mean, first off, what did you think of the new guys?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Tyler Toffoli looked like he absolutely belongs on this team. Like he did a lot of great things. Always seemed to be around the puck. Always seemed to be around the net. It kind of struck me how much the Jets have got guys that have a nose for the net. I mean, Gabe Vilardi, of course, we know, and he's out of the lineup right now. Sean Monahan is a guy who seems to live around the net. We know Nito Niederreiter, that's kind of his office. And, Tyler Toffoli and even Alex Iafallo, like you look at that second line that they rolled out last night, all of those guys kind of have a nose for the net. And I think that was evident on Iafallo's goal where we weren't even sure if it was Iafallo who got it. It might have been Toffoli, or it looked in real time like he might have got a piece of it. That's a good thing when you can't even tell who scored the goal because there's so much traffic in front of the other team's net that it could have hit any number of Jets players. That's something Rick Bowness has wanted his team to do more of. That's something that you look at how playoff hockey typically looks. Teams that can get into that blue paint, get those greasy ones, are teams that often do well. And it seems to me the Jets have another guy in Toffoli, but he's a guy who has that shoot first mentality. He's got a great shot. And, for a guy that hadn't had a practice, just a morning skate with his new line mates, yes, there's a history with those guys. So no doubt there is a comfort level, but I thought he was really good. And then, Colin Miller, just a very quiet, efficient game. And maybe we shouldn't be surprised. Dylan Samberg has become such a quiet leader on this team, Huss. And, we see Dylan Samberg just seemingly do all the right things. Like that's probably a perfect entry point for Colin Miller. Dylan Samberg's a young player who kind of wise beyond his years, plays with a poise and a presence. And, you certainly look at the end result. The Jets dominated really all facets of that game. The Capitals didn't have a whole lot of chances, and Miller was part of, a 6-man D that was really rock solid. And obviously now Rick Bowness has plenty of options at his disposal with what I would say is arguably the deepest roster that we've ever seen here in the Jets 2.0 era. You could certainly make a case that the 2018 run to the Western Final post-trade deadline was extremely deep as well. I think this roster absolutely rivals that. And you just have to look what the fourth line looked like last night, right? Vlad Nemestikov, who a game ago was your first line right winger, is now your fourth line center. Morgan Barron, Cole Perfetti, there's other options there as well. And when Gabe Vilardi comes back, it's going to be even more intriguing to see what that looks like. So these Jets are deep, and I think we just saw that depth really shine bright last night.
Well, and it's something that Bones talked about a little bit after the game. I mean, when you bring in, we'll just focus on the forwards right now, but when you bring in a player of Toffoli's caliber, you know that Gabriel Vilardi is hoped to be joining the team at some point when he gets back on the ice and, adding to that top six. It really does create some internal competition of a lot of players that have had big parts in the team's success so far, and that can't be anything but a good thing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they've got injury insurance, and you hope for the Jets' sake that they don't have to make decisions based on injuries, that they can just do it based purely on performance. And, I think that when you look at, who wasn't in the lineup last night, obviously Nate Schmidt comes out for Colin Miller, Rasmus Kupari, David Gustafson, the two extra forwards right now on the roster, and of course Logan Stanley as well. So you got 4 healthy scratches last night, plus Gabe Vilardi, who's hurt, and so you're going to have a 5th healthy scratch here. And you look at last night's forward group and you say, well, who comes out of that group? I suppose Cole Perfetti, given he's had his struggles, he's probably the guy that right now would be the 13th forward. But Cole Perfetti had a really good game last night, Huss, and maybe Cole Perfetti in a way almost hears footsteps. He knows his position right now is a little tenuous, but I thought the kid had his best game in a long, long time. He was very involved. I think he had 3 shots, a bunch more shot attempts, and that's an encouraging sign because he had a spell recently, Huss, I think something like 4 out of 5 games where he didn't even have a shot on net. And for an offensive player, if he's like, that's how you know he's really fighting it, if he's not even taking shots on net. Last night, though, he had the 3 on net. He hit 2 posts. I thought there were a lot of great signs for Cole Perfetti. And that's a good thing for the Jets because, if they're going to go 4 rounds deep in the playoffs, play hockey into June, which is what their hope is, chances are they're going to need contributions from everybody, whether they're in the starting lineup right now or not. These are you can file these under very good problems to have for the Winnipeg Jets. Lots of different line combinations. And, I think the way they started with Toffoli on that line with Monahan and Iafallo, we got to see top line Nikolai Ehlers. And that line last night, Huss, I thought did a lot of really good things. We've talked a lot about some of the struggles with Scheifele and Connor together and how Scheifele and Ehlers seem to have a lot of chemistry. I really liked what I saw from that top line. They were dangerous pretty much every shift last night. They had the beautiful goal where all 3 forwards played a big role in Connor's goal there. And so, that's the situation where now the Jets, they can roll 4 lines, and they did last night. I think the 4th line, and there wasn't a lot of special teams, so it was an even strength game. I think Perfetti and his line mates, they played 12 minutes. That's really good. And the Jets have a really busy schedule in March. They're going to need that. And if they can roll 4 lines with confidence and know that all 4 can produce, that puts them in the driver's seat.
Well, and speaking of the 4th line, and it was interesting hearing Bones talk about the 4th line, giving them a lot of credit for the way that they played, but also mentioning his conversation with Cole before coming back into the lineup. Of course, Cole, maybe to his benefit, sat out the game on Saturday, to be honest, when you consider about what happened in Vancouver. But he mentioned that he was going to try and get him up and get him going with, on the left side with line 2 at times. But the fact of the matter was that line that he was on was going, and they were playing them as a unit going forward. But I thought it was a good note for folks that might be sort of thinking that, Bones is soured on Perfetti. I mean, they are doing everything they can to try to put him in a situation to regain some of that confidence and get the momentum back going in his game that, he had earlier on the season with that great start. I'm not sure whether Cole Perfetti is going to be a player when the playoffs begin in that top 12, but for the time being right now, they certainly want him to be part of this. And the best thing that can happen for Cole is to, just start feeling a little bit better about where he's at, connection with his line mates, and, get back to producing the way he did so well earlier.
It's funny, Huss, and when Cole had those that first healthy scratch, I know there was a lot of hand wringing that Rick Bowness wasn't handling this properly, that that this isn't how you handle young players. I'll say this about Rick Bowness. He knows a thing or two about handling young players, and there are coaches around the NHL for sure that have a rep for being not very friendly when it comes to maybe their handling of young players. Rick Bowness is not one of those. And I go back to a conversation I had last year in Dallas with Jason Robertson. This was early last season when we were all just kind of getting to know Rick Bowness as the Jets head coach. And Jason Robertson was talking about his rookie season, which was 2020-21. You look at Robertson's stats, he had 45 points that year. Not unlike kind of Cole Perfetti's numbers right now. Jason Robertson was at times a healthy scratch. And that was the year, if you recall, where Rick Bowness had taken over post-bubble. The Jim Montgomery situation had. And Jason Robertson talked about how at the time he maybe felt like Rick Bowness was being unfair in terms of holding him accountable, how he was managing his minutes, his ice time, things like that. Jason Robertson, though, and this was last year when he had, I think 109 points last year, 46 goals, 63 assists, was arguably the MVP of the Dallas Stars. He said, in hindsight, the way Rick Bowness handled me was exactly what I needed. It was perfect. And he had nothing but praise for Rick Bowness. I just wonder if we're sort of going through a similar stage. Not to say that Cole Perfetti is going to be a 109-point player, 46-goal scorer, although I'm sure the Jets would love if he could become that. But I just think that there are different ways to approach young players. Maybe tough love sometimes, but also, kill them with kindness. And I think we saw a bit of that, as you just mentioned, with what Rick Bowness had to say post-game yesterday, that he's saying to Cole, look, kid, I'm going to try and get you some shifts with Monahan and Toffoli to really get you going. But as you said, Rick Bowness loved what he was seeing from Perfetti and his line, where he went, you know what? I don't need to boost this kid's confidence. He's playing so good right now. I'll just leave it as it is. And that's a great sign. And I think that's an example maybe of teaching and of learning.
No, I think it is a great point. Now, coming out of the deadline, we saw what the way the team looked last night with the additions of Toffoli and with Miller on the back end. That allows them to have, now two defensemen in the press box with Logan Stanley and Nate Schmidt. You got decisions to make every night. Are you going to bring Gus in? Are you going to bring in Rasmus Kapari? There's the players with the Moose that will be eligible to be called up.
Yep.
One thing that I don't believe we've probably talked enough about. There was a lot of credit to Kevin Cheveldayoff for what they did and how they acquired the players that they did and what they gave up. Where this has left them cap-wise has also been brilliant. And I know Larry Simmons is a big, big part of those decisions behind, and obviously getting the salary retention on the Toffoli deal allows them to do a couple things. First of all, there's still going to be accruing cap space as we go forward till the end of the season. It will take care of the bonuses for Cole Perfetti. But what's also interesting, Mike, is it also allows them the cap space to sign a particular player at the University of Michigan should he become available and be ready to go later on in April.
Right, and the offshoot is, to your point, and they don't have to waive anybody. Like right now, the Jets have 25 players on the roster. They're 2 over the normal limit as of last Friday at midnight. There is no roster limit. You could have 35 players on your roster if you want, as long as you're cap compliant. The salary cap still exists. The Jets have 25 right now, and they're cap compliant. And as you point out, Huss, they still have room to add more without having to put Logan Stanley or David Gustafson or Rasmus Kupari on waivers. They can keep all those bodies around. And that's why, going back to last week, like, I think at the time when the 50% retention on Tyler Toffoli's deal, a lot of people thought, oh, that might be because they're going to take some huge swing at a blue liner. And then when they got Colin Miller, who doesn't have a huge salary, some people might have gone, huh, that's it? I thought there'd be a bigger money player coming in. The reality is that retention on Toffoli allows for the scenarios that you just pointed out, to call up Ville Heinola maybe towards the end of the season, maybe get him in a couple games towards the end of the year, to sign Rutger McGroarty, to do other things, to put players on the injured reserve list should they get injured, and not have to worry about waivers to clear space to bring others up. So you're right. And, Huss, I almost feel like you snuck a peek over the email I sent this morning from my Skedline on what I'm writing about today, because that's the very subject I'm talking about. It's actually twofold, talking a little bit about the moves over the last two trade deadlines, which a guy named Brian Little actually helped facilitate. Kevin Cheveldayoff talked about this last Friday. If Brian Little doesn't waive his no trade clause a couple years ago, the Jets are still stuck with his $5 and change million cap hit. And if they wanted to put that on LTIR, they wouldn't have been able to accrue cap space the way they did the last 2 years. And that's allowed them to add guys like Niederreiter, Nemestikov, Monahan, Toffoli, Miller, and still have room. And you're right, the way they've managed the cap this season, at times they only had 22 players on the roster. But they were doing that with a purpose, and that purpose is now showing itself that they've got some cap room here to play with that can allow them to still make a number of moves. So you're right, Larry Simmons and, in a way, Brian Little have all played valuable roles in kind of helping this Jets team get to where it is and build the roster that it has.
Yeah, I mean, the key, they would not want to have Perfetti hit his – they'd love to see Perfetti hit his bonuses, but you don't want to pay an overage next season on the cap for that, and they're out of the woods as far as that goes, and then still have the ability to sign Rutger McGroarty, which I think many of us, myself included, expect and hope to be happening when his season is done with the Maize and Blue.
By the way, on that, there was some talk that Michigan might not get invited because they had kind of slipped a bit. It now looks they beat Notre Dame last weekend. Rutger McGroarty, I think, had 5 points in the 2 games, if I recall, maybe 6. Just a monster performance by him. Jets fans no doubt like to see Rutger McGroarty coming up big in playoff games, but they'll play this weekend in Minnesota in the semifinal of the Big Ten. But it looks like they are going to, even if they don't win this series this weekend, it's a one game against Minnesota on Saturday night. Even if they were to lose, looks like they're going to get invited to the NCAA tournament, which would probably take you now at least into towards the end of March, because there was a scenario, Huss, like had they lost to Notre Dame last weekend, that might have been it. Like Rutger McGroarty might have been available like now. But it looks like his season's going to be extended here by at least a few more weeks, but that still would likely give time for an addition before the regular season is out. And, it remains to be seen, I guess, how meaningful some of those games down the stretch are going to be for the Jets. Are they still fighting for first in the Central? Are they fighting for home ice advantage in, second versus third? We'll see how that plays out. But certainly a situation worth monitoring.
No doubt about that, Mike. And at the same time, despite a loss in their last time out, the Moose have really turned it around right now. And, we're seeing Brad Lambert with, some big performances. Jeff Malot's playing great. But as far as the prospects, if you will, Lambert, Chibrikov, Ville, of course, playing big minutes right now. And we did think that guys like Capobianco, Heinola, Axel Jonsson-Fjallby would all be potential, Toninato, of course, would all be potential call-ups and being black aces. But that was sort of thinking that the Moose were destined to not be part of the playoffs. Right. Now, again, their predicament is they need to be in that 5 spot to be in that 4-5 to play playoff games, period. But I would suggest that right now, with the way the roster is set, the Jets really don't have the need to kind of lean on the Moose for any players or any help right now. Touch wood, as long as people stay, healthy enough to be in the lineup. And at that point, those players can get playoff experience, hopefully, if they're able to make that. And then once that season is over, add to the mix to be part of a Black Ace group, even if they don't project to be in the lineup at any point.
Right. And of course, I'm sure most folks know this, but once the playoffs start, there is no salary cap anymore.
Oh, you don't say.
I think the Vegas Golden Knights are well aware of that. Tampa Bay Lightning a few years ago as well were aware of that. But so I mean, the only thing that would prevent call-ups would be, as you say, if the Moose are still alive and kicking in the playoffs. And to be perfectly honest, it's probably better for those guys rather than just bag skating as Black Aces after practice with the Jets in the playoffs. If they're playing big minutes with the Moose, there's no better way to stay game ready than actually playing playoff games, which they would be doing with the Moose. So you could put that down as a win-win. Now, obviously, if the Jets were to run into a rash of injuries, that could change. They obviously hope that isn't the case. Everybody stays healthy. Both teams can kind of go on runs here, and they have, as you say, some very good options, not only right now on the big league roster, but kind of waiting in the wings on the farm. I was at the Moose game, I guess 9 days ago when they beat Texas on the Sunday afternoon, and Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, he looked like the AHL Connor McDavid out there. He scored 2 goals that game, just absolutely beautiful. He was flying around the ice like he looked so confident. Lambert, Chibrikov were great. Villy had a really good game. Capobianco was the guy that honestly really jumped out to me that game, Huss. Like, we haven't seen him at all with the Jets this year. We saw him, in spurts last season when he was up with the Jets the whole year, and he'd occasionally go in and always played well. He's like leading the Moose in scoring. He's one of the top scoring defensemen in the AHL. He looked great. Like, he looked like a guy that, quite frankly, the AHL is probably beneath him at this point. Credit to him, though, from everything I've heard, like, he's just been a tremendous leader, mentor to some of the young kids down there. He was so great in the role that he had last year with the Jets, and he just continues to be very good in the role that he's had this year with the Moose. He is, just the ultimate pro. It's easy to see why the organization loves a guy like Capobianco and went out and re-signed him like they did.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, I'll say the same thing for Axel. I mean, the way he's handled, the demotion and the way he's playing right now. I mean, I still don't rule out, depending on the opponent, where they're at in the playoffs, depending on what happens, even though he's not on the roster right now, they know what they have in Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, and he is a guy that would, in my opinion at least, would be a possibility for a 4th-line role at some point, depending on what happens with the rest of the roster.
For sure. And it may be a situation too, Huss, where he's more game ready than even a guy like Gustafsson or Kapari. Yes, those guys are getting practice reps with the Jets, but let's just say the Jets stick with the roster that we saw last night for a bit here, and we'll see what happens with Gabe Vilardi. And if Gustafsson and Kapari are on the outside looking in for a while, meanwhile, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby is like playing first-line minutes and playing extremely well. Like, he's a guy that could absolutely jump right in. And you don't have to worry about rust or, how long he might take to get up to speed. He's up to speed. And so you're right. That's a situation. And going back to the cap room that you mentioned, the Jets will have the cap room if they want to even bring up a guy like Axel before the season's done.
Now, Mike, you're heading out on the road on this big extended road trip after the team finishes up these home games against the Ducks on Friday, but first up, it's the Nashville Predators tomorrow. And we'll get into Nashville in a second. But I had said in between the second and third periods of the game on Saturday in Vancouver, I was wondering whether Hellebuyck was going to be coming back out for the third period. And I said that personally, I would leave him in there, finish up that game, and then give Laurent Brossoit the start last night.
Yeah.
Happy I was wrong about that, because obviously it was great to see Connor feel good, get a shutout, put up those numbers. But, considering how much hockey this team is playing over the course of the next little while.
Yeah.
And the thought that, as we get closer towards the end of the season, there might be a little bit more rest for Helly. Like, I expect him to play this game against Nashville tomorrow, but assuming that is the case, does LB go against the Ducks on Friday, do you think? Does he start the road trip against the Blue Jackets? And how many times might we see Brossoit over the course of the next couple of weeks with back-to-back mixed in and not more than one day off between any games until April?
So of course, we haven't heard Rick Bowness declare his starter. Jets are off today, but I don't think I'm going on a limb to say Connor Hellebuyck will absolutely be in the net tomorrow night against the Predators. That's a big divisional game. 10-0-2 the Predators are in the last, so basically hottest team in the league. Connor Hellebuyck's getting that game tomorrow. I firmly believe, in fact, I'd be stunned if Laurent Brossoit is not in net on Friday night to finish out the homestand. I then think you probably see Hellebuyck start at least the first 3 games of the road trip in Columbus, in Madison Square Garden, and then probably in Newark next Thursday. Then you have the back-to-back the following weekend. They're playing the Islanders and the Caps, and you're going to see, obviously, Laurent Brossoit in one of those two. So you look at how the next 2 weeks will play out. Brossoit likely gets this Friday, and then he'll get the following Saturday or Sunday, depending the order they want to go in. And I think that's probably what they're going to try and do here, Huss, at least give him 1 game a week. I'm with you. I actually thought Connor Hellebuyck might get the pull, not because of, although he wasn't at his best against Vancouver, that's for sure. I wondered if he was still fighting a bit of a bug that we know he had. He missed practice last Thursday in Seattle because he was under the weather. But I think, with, and then when they left him out, I thought probably he wasn't going to play last night. And then I thought, okay, maybe Hellebuyck plays Wednesday, Friday, and they give Brossoit Sunday in Columbus. But we know that's not how it played out. And I guess in hindsight, Huss, like, maybe they just didn't want Connor Hellebuyck to have that bad taste in his mouth for too long. Like, if they had pulled him, say, Saturday, and then he doesn't play till Wednesday, and then it's a tough game against a good Nashville team, like, that's a long time. I think probably they knew him best, and they also know that traditionally he's very good at the bounce back. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think after he's had kind of a rough outing, Connor Hellebuyck is money. And we saw that. He wasn't very busy last night. His best save might have come in the first, 15 seconds.
It did, for sure.
Because, imagine that goes in, and all of a sudden, for what would have been, I think, the 7th time in 8 games, like, the Jets are behind 1-0, and coming off that loss, you're like, oh, my goodness. Well, that was a huge save, and his toughest save for sure. He had a couple of really good ones later in the game. But, yeah, I think that's the goalie plan here. And I think by the time the season ends, it wouldn't surprise me to see Brossoit in the 23 to 24 start range and Hellebuyck around, 58, 59. I think that would kind of be the sweet spot given where they're at right now. And hey, Laurent Brossoit, he's coming off a shutout, right? He's a guy that you kind of want to get back in the net as quickly as you can because he's just been lights out as well.
Yeah, and so let's assume it's Helly, LB. I guess if Hellebuyck goes Columbus on Sunday, Rangers Tuesday, Jersey on the 21st.
Yeah.
You then have these back-to-back matinees. And I would think, I wouldn't even be surprised if maybe LB got the Jersey game and Washington if Hellebuyck is playing these other ones. Because I'm pretty sure, and okay, Remis has got this up. When the team gets home,
yes,
I'm pretty sure you're going to want to have Hellebuyck ready to go for the Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights. And then I would imagine that game on the 30th against the Ottawa Senators would probably be an LB start.
Yeah, and then look, 1 game beyond that, it's the Kings, right? So that's that 5-game homestand, Oilers, Golden Knights, Senators, Kings. I think we can safely assume you're going to want to put your number 1 against Edmonton, Vegas, LA. Those are all teams the Jets could see in the playoffs this year at some point. and maybe LB starts against Ottawa and even at the end of the road or the homestand against Calgary before they then hit the road for 4 divisional games, Minnesota, Nashville, Dallas, Colorado. Those could all be huge games or they could be meaningless depending on where things are at. But yeah, I mean, I would think LB probably gets 2 out of 5 on that homestand. And quite frankly, it's probably the 2 games against the non-playoff opponents. Hellebuyck will get the 3. So you're right. They could throw him in against New Jersey and one of the back-to-backs and have a 3-2 split on the 5-game road trip as opposed to 4-1. And again, going back to my point a few minutes ago, you'd have every confidence in the world because Laurent Brossoit, he's done nothing to dissuade you from playing him. Yeah.
Just before we break, Mike, tomorrow the Preds coming to town.
Yeah.
And
how are they doing this, Huss?
Listen,
how are they doing this?
This is not a team that I thought had this sort of a run in them. And ever since Trotz and Brunette told them that the trip to the Sphere was canceled, they have been the best team in the National Hockey League. I'm not sure they really match up against the top 3 teams on paper right now. They've got a world-class goaltender as well in UC Saros, though, and this team comes in with a ton of momentum tomorrow. It should be a really interesting game and a good test for Winnipeg.
For sure. And, it reminds me a bit, like, this is kind of what Nashville did last year, too. Although last year they actually had traded a bunch of players at the deadline, including Nino Niederreiter, of course. And then they went on a crazy run at the end of the season, almost got into the playoffs. They were right. They almost knocked the Jets out of the playoffs last year. This year, they didn't trade at the deadline. There was talk that they might be moving some guys. Alex Carrier was a defenseman, certainly thought. They actually added a couple players, Anthony Beauvillier, Jason Zucker, I believe they got, right? So they went and rewarded their group for what's been a real nice run here. And yeah, it'll be a great test for the Jets. You look at their next 2 games after tomorrow, a Ducks team that isn't very good, a Columbus team that isn't very good. The Jets, no doubt, they'll want to get tomorrow because they could have themselves a real nice week, Huss, building off the win last night if they can come up with another big win tomorrow night.
Yeah, well, looking forward to it. Of course, you and Ken will be all over it in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press. Thanks for doing this, Mike, and get ready for we'll look forward to talking to you next week from the Big Apple, I imagine, as you'll be on the road with the Winnipeg Free Press. But thanks again for the time, as always. Say hi to Piper and the crew, and we'll talk to you soon.
Will do. Enjoy the week, Huss.
All right, great stuff with Mike McIntyre. We're going to get into the story in the world of curling. We've been waiting 20-odd days for this. Coming right up in a second, Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun joins us next. The season ticket drive is on right now. I've had great response from a number of people involved in the Winnipeg Sports Talk Circle that have already done it and, of course, booked their seats for the Stanley Cup playoffs. Go to winnipegjets.com/deposit. If you deposit on a package for next season, you can get priority access to playoff tickets, much like myself and other season ticket holders have. Cannot wait for the spring, but before the spring, we got to get to the weekend and through the trade deadline. Of course, we're not too far off between talking lots of Bombers, and of course, Princess Auto cannot wait to welcome Blue Bomber fans to Princess Auto Stadium coming up this year when the Bombers get at it. Princess Auto is also a huge supporter of curling in the province. I mean, they've been behind Team Jennifer Jones, and now we're all pulling for our Manitoba teams, including Princess Auto's Reed Carruthers, who's 4-1 right now. Right now, they're tied for second, I guess, technically, with the Botcher rink in their pool. Northern Ontario, who Manitoba beat, is one game or half game up, if you will, to use a baseball style term, 5-1 right now. Matty Dunstone representing Manitoba, 3-2 right now after his loss last night to Brendan Botcher. Of course, Princess Auto is not only a great sponsor of our teams and our curlers, but Winnipeg Sports Talk, but also the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Pop by and see him in store, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7 365 at princessauto.com. Thinking about the playoffs, I know there'll be a lot of Winnipeg Jet fans and WST listeners wanting to maybe get some new gear for the whiteout. You know where to do that. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway, Winnipeg's true sports superstore for over 40 years, family owned in the Peg, with thousands of pieces of Winnipeg Jets merchandise, all the jerseys, with your favorite players, name numbers, done however you want them. Not to mention, hats, hoodies, Q-zips. They've got it all. Great Bomber section, NFL, Major League Baseball, and of course, for people that are playing the game, the biggest and best hockey section in town. Not to mention snowboards for spring break and all that cool stuff on the Kings skate, snow, and surf side. Pop by and see them. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. And make sure to follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And couple days with no Jets, but then we go Friday, Saturday night, late night, 9:30 starts. Can't think of a better time to get together with the gang at your local Boston Pizza to watch the game with sound on the big screen and enjoy some weekend ice-cold schooners, world-famous BP wings and gourmet pizzas, and heck, any day, 7 days a week. If you want to get it hot and fresh to your door, you can order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, we got to get to this next story. And again, you would think that we'd be talking about Gushu's incredible run with another Brier championship or Rachel Holman at the Worlds. But the biggest story in curling is the unfinished business from day one of the Scotties 3 weeks ago. And who better to break it down and fill us in on what is going on than our guy, Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun, and the host for you curling fans of the Riser podcast, which you can check out the YouTube version of it. The link is in the description here. Remo, you can throw that in the chat if you want. And, of course, wherever you get your favorite pods. Ted, it is great to have you on the program, as always. Thanks for doing this.
Well, thanks for the plug, Huss. And, yeah, good to be here. It's a kind of a crazy day. Been on this story all day long and really been working on it since, like you said, day one of the Scotties. Banging my head against the wall trying to get more information about it. And it's interesting because when the information finally came out, it was Brianne Harris herself who released the information, not any of the other organizations that were involved. So that's where we're at right now. And it's really it's an interesting situation for sure.
Well, it is. Before we get to everything that we've kind of learned today, for people that, maybe don't follow the game as closely, take us back to the Scotties to just hours before Carey Anderson and her rink began their quest to be 5-time consecutive champions. The news that broke regarding Brianne, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Well, isn't that what's just so weird about it is that the 4-time defending champions are getting ready to practice to go out on the ice and defend their title. And then the bombshell news comes out that Curling Canada has released a statement, and it says that Brianne Harris, the lead for Carey Anderson's team, has been ruled ineligible. Now I use this because that's what it was. It's a very cryptic way of saying that she's not going to be playing in this, that it didn't come from us. Somebody else obviously has handed down a decision and told Curling Canada this is how it's going to be, and they told them you're not going to talk about it either, and the team was not going to talk about it either. So they basically, they put this out there, and it was like throwing a grenade, right? Like the entire curling world was wondering what the heck is going on. How does something like this happen, especially with a nationally funded team wearing Team Canada colors at the Scotties? So as we know now, and honestly, I mean, from day one, it looked like and it smelled like a positive doping violation. And as we know now, that is what it was. But no information was released until today. And the fact is, we know now that she tested positive for a drug, a supplement called Lingandrol. I believe I'm saying that correctly. Back on February 15th. The test was administered on January 24th. It was a random out-of-competition test. And then the B sample, they were waiting for the B sample to come back. It took some time, several weeks. That has to be done in a very a convoluted way, I guess, for the layperson, where there's a representative of the drug testing organization, an independent witness. the person who is being tested and their counsel, and they all have to be together, and then the test gets done and revealed what the final B sample test is. And in this case, it came back positive again. And so we now know that Brianne Harris is facing a 4-year ban for using this banned substance, but she is appealing, and I'll get into that as well, Huss.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and I'm just looking, and again, you can go to the Winnipeg Sun. Ken's got a developing story, and I'm sure is going to be added to throughout the day. But the quote right at the top is, "As best as can be determined at this time, Ms. Harris was unknowingly exposed to the banned substance through bodily contact." What does that mean?
Well, I can tell you that I can only surmise what exactly it means, but I can tell you that there is precedent for this happening. It happened in 2020 with a rowing athlete out of Quebec who tested positive for the exact same substance and who argued successfully that that it was a contamination through bodily contact with her boyfriend at the time. And that was upheld, and it was proven that this can be transmitted through bodily contact, through bodily fluids, sweat, or saliva or semen. And so this is seemingly the argument that Brianne Harris and her lawyer are going to present. They've already said that they want to take it to the Court of Appeal for Sport, which is an international tribunal that it was set up by the IOC and is operated by the World Anti-Doping Association. And they are, determined to try to clear her name in this fashion. So as much as it's breaking news to me that we even know that she did test positive for this banned substance, there is more breaking news in that she has this appeal planned and that this has been successful in the past.
What do we know about ligandrol?
Yeah, so little that I can barely pronounce it, to be honest. Haas, I've been looking up a fair bit of it. I even have it on my phone right now. But, it's not like it just sounds like it's a drug for building muscle strength and adding energy. And it's definitely on the banned list. I believe it mimics the activity of testosterone in the body, which is the kind of thing that when you hear that, you say that's probably banned. That's not the kind of thing that they like to have in sport. So it is something that it would appear would be used specifically for building muscle mass, for rejuvenating energy and those kind of things. And if it does that, then it's something you cannot use if you're a carded athlete. So, or if you're an athlete of any kind, if you're subject to drug testing. So clearly, however it got into her system, it did get into her system. And this is something that she's going to have to defend. I mean, it's an interesting argument that she sounds like she plans to make. She's adamant that she did not knowingly take it. I think there's a lot of people in the curling world that believe that. I think in a lot of sports, in a lot of situations, when an athlete comes out and says something like that, they don't believe them. The tendency is for people not to believe them because so many people have said things like that when they actually did do it and they later admit that they did do it. But in this case, I think a lot of people in the curling world would lean towards believing her. But I mean, I don't know. I can't say anything right at this point. And as I've said before, the court of arbitration is going to have to hear this and make a decision as to whether there is any validity to her argument or not.
If the argument is that she, through physical contact with her partner, got it, is her partner not an elite curler as well?
I can't comment on that.
Oh, okay. I maybe I'm mixing her up with one of the other people. I was just wondering that, if there is a. It's just anyways, if that's obviously I'm getting her mixed up with one of the other. There are many curling couples out there. that is for sure. So what does this mean for Team Anderson going forward? I mean, they still have slams and whatnot. I mean, I guess Karwacki, who did such a great job at the Scotties, is now the full-time lead moving forward until this appeal can be heard.
It would seem so. And, I touched base very briefly with Carey today, not saying much. Obviously, they've been instructed right from the beginning. And I mean, I'm not trying to absolve Curling Canada completely in all of this, but it does sound like they had no choice really but to keep things quiet. Harris's lawyer did put out a statement saying that there was absolutely no choice but to keep it quiet because the B sample hadn't come back yet. She was provisionally suspended based on the A sample. The B sample could have cleared her still, so there was no reason to say anything. The B sample did not clear her, and now they came out with their announcement that of the positive test. But the Carey Anerson's team was in the same boat. They really couldn't say anything, which obviously, Huss, was a very difficult situation for them. You can only imagine when you're heading into a tournament like that and you're so focused on the game and playing and winning, and you have that hanging over your head as well, and concern for a person that they support immensely, and all those kinds of things. So I don't think it's been an easy time, and Carey certainly reiterated to me that it has not been an easy time. They're not commenting any further other than what they put out on social media earlier in the day. But the slams are different anyways. I mean, this is like they now, had they won the Scotties, this would be a major deal because presumably Harris would not be eligible for the World Championship either. And, they're a team that's trying to become Canada's Olympic team for 2026. This deals a major, major blow to those plans, and particularly for Brianne Harris, which is why she wants to get this rectified as soon as possible so she has a chance to perhaps be involved in the pursuit of the Olympic dream still. I can only imagine how difficult it is for everyone in that group.
Oh, for sure.
To keep their mouths shut, and they're just, I'm sure hurting inside.
Well, and it was pretty clear that, all of that turmoil and the fact that it came like literally hours before they'd done media, they'd done everything leading into the tournament. And then hours before they were about to go, this news breaks, and it was a huge story. Throughout Canada, even for people that don't follow curling, as closely as many of us do here around Winnipeg and Manitoba, and particularly the Anderson rink, who is, looking to make history. There was tons of turmoil, not to mention they were probably being asked about this ad nauseum. Needless to say, the Rachel Holman rink has been so unbelievable this year. They were very deserving champions, but it was unfortunate, certainly for the Anderson rink overall, that they had to deal with that going forward. Ted, any idea about a time frame on this appeal? And what the best case scenario is, because I'm sure the sooner the better for Brianne and the entire rink to get clarity on this moving forward.
Well, I'm trying to get that information, Huss. It's hard to nail down. I'm looking through pages and pages of the website on for the World Anti-Doping Association. And I'm just going to tell you, I can't say this 100% for sure, but I do believe that in some situations, you would, if you were a Canadian athlete who tested positive, you would have to go do an appeal through the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sports first, and then perhaps that could be advanced on. I believe because she's deemed an international athlete, because she played as Team Canada as a member of Team Canada for several years, that this process can go directly to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. And if that's the case, I would assume that would take the timeline down a little bit. But I'm not well enough versed in all of this to know just how long it will take. As I recall, I covered the Olympics in 2018 in Pyeongchang, and the Russians mixed doubles curlers did test positive there. And I think it took a good year before the Norwegian fourth place team got their medals, when the bronze was finally stripped from them and all those appeals had been finished. So it could be a really long time. As you know, if the word court comes into it, for me, it's like, that's probably going to take a long time.
Well, and I imagine the stakes are incredibly high for this. Brianne is part of one of the great teams in the entire world and a top Canadian team. You mentioned that Olympic berth will be competed for over the coming years, but a 4-year ban not only would take her completely out of that equation, but also as a funded and carded athlete probably would have some pretty significant financial ramifications as well.
Well, there's so much on the line, Huss, and that's why I'm sure she so vigorously wants to defend this situation, defend her name, clear her name, and look, what a difference that would be if she can do it. Regardless, having your name associated with something like this in the first place is just never good. It doesn't ever really go away. People tend to remember these things. They see them, and that's what they recall. And I just hope that if, she is able to clear her name, that, people will look at it as what it is. But as Curling Canada CEO Nolan Thiessen said today, they said they support the athlete very much in her appeal. And they, but they also completely respect the process of drug testing and will stand by whatever the ramifications are, because the truth is, we all know, us in this day and age, that if it's in your system, it got there somehow. Maybe you can prove that you didn't do it on purpose, but until you can do that, you're facing the punishment. So this is a very, very intriguing situation that we thought might resolve soon, but probably is going to be a while longer.
Yeah, in some ways, it's just getting started in a lot of ways. Ted Wyman of the Winnipeg Sun, I'm sure Ted will have much more, obviously, in the paper, but also at the Riser podcast. You can check that out on YouTube. There's a link in the description. Ted, this is the big story that everyone's been talking about for weeks. Probably shouldn't talk curling without quickly recognizing the greatness of the Brad Gushue rink, as well as pretty nice performances by a lot of Manitobans, including the Carruthers rink, Matty Dunstone, and of course Winnipeg's Mike McEwen, who was very strange seeing him wear the green going all the way to the final, going up against Gushue.
Yeah, I felt bad for Mike. I got to tell you, I've known that guy for a long time, back to the days in Brandon when I worked at the Brandon Sun, and he was a young junior curler who got his first big taste playing against Brad Gushue in a Canadian final, and he lost that one too. But he, I know he felt like when you get that close, like he hasn't been this close before, and you get that close and you've just got it and you can almost taste it. I think that hurts more than just about anything else that you can imagine. He did make it to the final of a Olympic trials once and lost on last rock to Kevin Cooey, so that was a pretty tough one as well. But I thought Mike did a pretty great job and showed why he's pretty well respected in the curling world, because he is such a good shooter, but he's also such a good person to talk to, so insightful. And I just definitely want to give a tip of the cap to him. But Brad Gushue, what can you say? I mean, there was a time when there was a lot of debate about who was the greatest of all time. Right now, there's not much debate. His team has simply done everything in the last 6, 7 years, 8 years. They've won it 6 times. They've won it 3 in a row now. They're doing things that no other curlers really have done, and they're doing it in a time when curling's as precise and full of talented athletes and skills as we've ever seen in the history of the sport. I find it amazing. I thought Brendan Botcher had him this week, and then yet he couldn't get into the final even. So hats off to Gushue. I think the fact is he is not going to be satisfied unless he's standing on the top of the world podium this year. I'm sure winning the Brier is great, but those guys really want to see Canada back at the top of the podium, and I think this is their year to take that step.
Oh, and you just knew. I mean, I was watching the final, and it was 2-1, and there was that shot that Gushue made where he hit his own rock, which was out of the rings, nudged it in, and rolled in as well for 3. And you just realized that, Mike, who had so many fans pulling for him there in Regina, was going up against a beast of a team that just was not going to lose. Just before we go, well, what do you make of Rachel Homan's chances to at the Worlds? I believe that starts this week in Nova Scotia. They have been the team to beat in Canada. Will they be the team to beat in the world once things get going out east?
I think so, yeah. I mean, they've won almost everything they've been in this year. 6 finals, won 5 of them, I think, or it might be 7 finals, won 6 of them, including the Scotties, 3 Grand Slams. I mean, Tirinzoni was in all of those Grand Slams, and Tirinzoni would obviously be the favorite because they've won it 3 years in a row in Sydney. I think Homan's the favorite, though. I think this is the year Canada gets back on top. Don't forget that Homan's team has lost 5 games all season. Games not events.
Where does that rank amongst the greatest seasons in curling history?
I wish I had the answer for you on that one. I mean, my pal Jerry Gertz at Curling Zone can probably come up with that because he's got a big algorithm that says all of the records of the teams. But I don't know that you'd even have it, for real curling history. I don't think anyone can tell you how many games Ernie Richardson lost in his heyday or how many Carey Burtnick lost in his heyday. This is something that's been kept track of more recently, but it's a very impressive stat. I mean, I don't think anyone that I've talked to can remember any team being this dominant. And I think it's 30 to 48 and 5. I mean, think about that, man. Like, who does that? But I mean, what sport does that ever happen?
Well, in curling, because I mean, one imprecise shot of a couple millimeters can be the difference between winning and losing. And at the level that the home and rink has been playing and the competition they're going up against, I mean, it really has been amazing. And, obviously the focus, I think, here in Manitoba is going to be on the future of the Anderson rink and this Brianne Harris appeal. But we appreciate you coming on today, Ted, because I know it has been a very busy day for you. And just quickly plug the riser. And I imagine this might be talked about on the pod coming up.
Well, it will be, but it's a new pod that I'm doing with my buddy Greg Strong out of Toronto. It is a sports pod. It is not specifically about curling, but because we're both curling writers, we talk a lot about curling. But what we do too, Huss, is we like to have on a media guest and talk about the business, talk about the media business, talk about how people got into the business, talk about the future of the business and processes that people use in writing. And then we get into the topics and we talk about everything that's hot in the, of that day. And then we like to tell some stories about our time in the business. And we've both been in for like 30 years, so we've got some good ones. Anyway, it's a lot of fun.
Well, listen, I'm looking forward to future episodes as well. Speaking of telling stories, I see you and Vivian in chat to some other people. Can't have you on without quickly mentioning and getting your recollection of the one-of-a-kind former Blue Bomber coach, Dave Ritchie, who recently passed. He was a real one, and what an absolute beauty. But, I mean, you covered this team, for a long time while he was around. What were your memories of Coach Ritchie after his unfortunate passing?
I hope he's drinking the good water somewhere today. But, I was sports editor in the office more so when he was the coach, and have been writing about the team more recently since 2016. But I did have a chance to meet and sit down with him in Hamilton a couple of years ago when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he wasn't doing that great then. He wasn't in the best of shape, and that was kind of hard to see. Definitely made me, sad for him, and not terribly shocked when I had heard about his passing because he really didn't seem well then even. But just a delightful guy. Like the stories that he could tell, the way he could relate a story, Huss, is something that just was. It was like holding court. I mean, the guys used to talk always about just going into his office and he'd just put his feet up and just tell stories for hours. I mean, we don't do that today, I guess Wally Bono is the last guy that I remember that I dealt with that still did that. But most of the guys don't do that anymore. But Dave Ritchie was one of a kind. He meant so much to the people that were involved in the organization at the same time as him. I've heard from Doug Brown about him, Milt Stiegel, Troy Westwood, many of the people that were involved with the team when he was here, Kahari Jones, and it's just nothing but pure love. And you just, it's sad. He was 85. It's too bad that he couldn't have a few more years because he just truly loved football. It meant so much to him. And I am glad that he was able to be a part of that Hall of Fame ceremony a couple of years ago. And, it was meaningful for me to have been there for it.
Just as a fan, growing up around the team and watching it, he just seemed like such a unique character, a one of one that obviously, put the game face on and could be hard ass. But when you hear from the players, they just absolutely love the man. And we've been hearing a lot of that this week. Ted, appreciate your time as always. I know you got lots to get to as you continue on this curling beat and the Brianne Harris story. We really appreciate you jumping on WST today.
All right, man. It's my pleasure. Have a good one.
Good stuff. There is Ted Wyman, a WST favorite. More on this story at the Winnipeg Sun and again in future episodes of The Riser. All right, let's get Michael Remis back in here. And Remo, we do have to get to quite a busy night of action in the National Hockey League. No Jets tonight, but no shortage of games on the docket.
And they've done a good job here with the schedule, Huss. We had a nice 4 games yesterday, ending with the Kings and Islanders. The Kings taking that one. Islanders, they got the road trip there. But a number of games tonight, and I'm looking at some big matchups here. Rangers at Hurricanes is a big one. If we're keeping an eye on the Central Division, the Dallas Stars has big matchup for them. You know, it seems like they've been playing the Sharks and the Ducks so much over the last couple of weeks. We've commented that here, but they've got a real opponent tonight in the Florida Panthers. That's a big one too.
We're all big Pomo fans tonight, I'll tell you that much. Let's just go through all these games and get to the Coolbet lines. You know, Detroit right now is in a dogfight with the New York Islanders, and Detroit was sending thank you notes to the Kings for stopping that winning streak of the Islanders last night. But basically, we've got Detroit, Islanders, and Tampa battling for those 2 wildcard spots. Detroit needs this one tonight. They're actually a underdog, plus 105 in Buffalo tonight. Buffalo minus 123. The Rangers in Carolina to take on the Hurricanes, potential playoff preview. Plus 147 for the Rangers, minus 173 for the Hurricanes. We did talk today on the Lock Shop. We were just looking at the wild card races and what could happen. How good would a first-round matchup between the Rangers and Islanders be with Pat Roy on the bench now?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that's how you get rivalries, Huss. You put them in these forced playoff matchups, and you hope you get some fireworks happening. And yeah, anytime you get Rangers and Islanders, I'd be into it. And I thought it wasn't going that well for the Islanders, but they seem to be a bit on a heater as they went through, the Sharks and the Ducks.
6 in a row. They think they'd won 6 in a row going into the game against the Kings last night. Anyways, continuing on with these games tonight, Blue Jackets and Habs, a little bit of a draft lottery bowl. Blue Jackets minus 106, Habs minus 110, basically a pick 'em. 2 more teams that are probably destined for the draft lottery, Pittsburgh and Ottawa. Pitt, a slight road favorite, minus 114 against the Sens. Flyers, huge home favorites, minus 321 against the Sharks. And then is this Panthers-Stars game. And this one was a pick-em earlier. Dallas now a slight favorite against the Panthers.
Yeah, I'm looking at Money Puck. I always go over the percentages there, see what they say on their math. They do have Dallas slight favorite, 52.3% to win. We'll see how Florida does on the road. I think they're one of the top teams in the league, very deep. They got Tarasenko. He had an amazing debut with a couple points. I haven't seen anything about Aaron Ekblad's status. They had a collision on the weekend. It looked like nothing, but I don't know, maybe it was in the wrong spot. Ekblad went down. He's had injury issues in the past, but I think Florida, I think they're primed to make a big run. I see some interesting comments in chat here. Maybe people have strong opinions, one way or another, about head coach Paul Maurice and the way that he left here. But no doubt to me, Florida, the Stanley Cup finalists last year, I think they're primed to go back again this season. And if you want to pick a game of the night, this is certainly the one with Dallas, who's been playing very well the last couple games.
Yeah, but as they say, they're moving up a couple weight classes with this Panthers opponent tonight. Wild minus 199 favorites against the Yotes. Ducks and Blackhawks, you can probably skip that one. Chicago is slight minus 113 favorite. Important game for the Jets in the Central. We'll be cheering for the Flames tonight. Plus 141 home dogs to the Avalanche and Nate McKinnon at minus 166 on the money line. And the final game of the night, Vegas, minus 147 road faves at the Kraken, who were plus 125 on the money line. Now, let's see if our Lock Shop stuff is up yet. Yes, it is. Busy night tonight. We've got a partner parlay. We're taking the Wild to beat Arizona in regulation, the Panthers and the Avalanche both to win. That's been boosted to 5-1. And then all our sharps in the chat were throwing out their favorite props today. We got a shot prop, Alex Nylander and Wyatt Johnson, both 2 shots or more. Neckash, 3 shots. Caulfield and McKinnon, 4 or more. That one's at plus 600. And then a McKinnon goal, Konechny assist, Jamie Benn point, plus 850. All there in the Coolbet exclusives. And of course, we're back at it tomorrow with a big game day edition. I can't wait for this Preds game.
Yeah, Jets, Preds. I saw a pretty sweet offer from the Jets. So you can get a ticket to that game tomorrow and a ticket to Foreigner. Pretty awesome offer. So yeah, big divisional matchup. It'll be a national game again, 6:30 start time. I didn't mind the 6:30 start yesterday. Switch it up once in a while. So Nashville have been super hot. And
is it 6:30 tomorrow, did you say?
Yeah, 6:30. Yeah. Big national. The Jets are in the spotlight this week. They don't get those key Saturday 6 p.m. that often. But 6:30 on Sportsnet tomorrow. So we'll get a good look at Nashville. And you mentioned their farm team, Milwaukee, been very good. And we kind of saw this last year at the end. They brought up Tommy Novak and Evangelista, and those guys were on fire. And bringing it with Nashville, they got off to that slow start. UC Saros didn't really have his A game, and they're there. And that's the thing too with the storyline with their Milwaukee. Askarov has been amazing for them. They picked him in the first round a couple of years ago, and you have to wonder if they do move Saros to bring in the young goalie in the offseason or something. We'll have to wait and see on that.
I mean, that is why it's been talked about, because they have such a young stud moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
But man, Saros, we know how important a legit ace number 1 goaltender is here in Winnipeg, and Barry Trotz, trust me, knows what Saros means to the Preds as well. And a pretty incredible lineage of goalies there. You go from Rinne to Saros, and potentially the next one is Askarov. Tomorrow in the Lock Shop, noon over at Edmonton Sports Talk. Before we get going, we will dive into our Players' Championship picks. Big tournament on the PGA Tour. Scotty Scheffler, a massive favorite, minus 575 after his performance on the weekend at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks to everyone that jumped on. Shout out to the podcast listeners. Everybody with us today on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Big thanks to Dave McCarthy. Great chat with him. Mike McIntyre. And, of course, Teddy Drip himself, Ted Wyman. Always love having Ted on the program. We'll get after it tomorrow. Check in on the Preds, who are here tomorrow to play at Winnipeg. And we'll also have Murat Atesh with his thoughts coming out of the deadline, as well as on tomorrow's game against the Predators. Big thanks to all the sponsors that make the show happen each and every day, and all of you for making us a part of yours. See you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Be here live on YouTube for a game day edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.